Well, good afternoon, everybody. I'm going to give it just a second for everybody to get admitted and have your screens fill with our splash screen for the Trail Fund, the Legacy Trails Program, today's National Wilderness Stewardship Alliance webinar. Hi, everybody. My name is Randy Welsh. I'm the Executive Director for the National Wilderness Stewardship Alliance. It's a pleasure to have you with us here today to talk about an exciting new trail stewardship program that offers an outstanding opportunity for trail improvement work on the national forests within wilderness areas. We're going to be talking about America Trails' new Legacy Trails program. With me today is Mike Passo, who is the Executive Director for America Trails, Cathy Corbett, their new program manager for Legacy Trails program, and Kristen Thrall, the acting assistant program leader for the National Trails program for the Forest Service, along with Dave Cantel, our program leader for our program chair for NWSA, who will help with the Q&As. Before I turn it over to Mike for some further introductions, I just wanted to say a few words about this particular opportunity. As many of you know, NWSA has had a Trail Partner Fund where we've successfully have a challenge cost share with the Forest Service to provide for trail maintenance on the National Forest System trails. Well, this particular program is different. Its genesis comes from the Roads and Trails Legacy program that the Forest Service has managed for the last 12 years. We're going to get into the details of that program here with this slideshow, but I just wanted to say that a lot of it's modeled after the Trail Partner Fund. So if you've had some experience there, you'll be very familiar with what's going to be shown here today. But it does have some complexities and some uniquenesses to it because of the requirements for the types of trails improvement that it will fund. But it does offer a great opportunity for wilderness stewardship groups to take corrective action on trails that may need rehabilitation, that are causing damage, erosion to watersheds, where there might be fish passage issues. And traditionally, the Roads and Trails Legacy program may have been thought of as an outside of wilderness program. Well, I'm here to tell you that it can definitely be used inside a wilderness, and we're going to show you how, and let's go dive into the details. So Mike Passo, American Trails Executive Director. Mike and I have worked together for a number of years. Mike's been leading American Trails now for many years. I'm going to allow him to introduce his team and start us off on about the Legacy Trails program. So Mike.
Great. Thanks, Randy. Yeah, my name is Mike Passo. I'm the Executive Director of American Trails, and we are just over the moon excited for this opportunity to work with Randy and the Forest Service on implementing the Legacy Roads and Trails program, specifically targeted to trails and trail partner organizations, which is a new thing. The Legacy Roads and Trails program has been around forever, and you've probably heard of it, actually. Well, not forever, but at least like 10 years, right, Kristen? But the new thing this year is that they've been able to carve out a piece of it that really is targeted to specifically to trails and trail needs, and is going to go directly to trail partner organizations. So we're super excited to help make that happen, and we've been working with Randy now to set this up. Like Randy said, you know, I've been involved in the Trail Partner program that Randy and NWSA has put on for years. And we really thought that modeling it directly after that program made the most sense. So we're kind of really excited to be able to work with Randy and have his expertise of years down the road of how to make these types of programs work. So And with that, I'm going to introduce our Director of Strategic Communications and the Trail Program Director, Cathy Corbett. She's come on board specifically as a part of this program and has a larger role with American Trails and Strategic Communications as well. She's a trained landscape architect, so she's gonna really, I think, have a depth of knowledge that can help answer questions and be your primary point of contact. And we're also contracting with Randy to help kind of roll out this program. So between the two of them, I think we have a really superstar team working on this. So with that, I'm going to pass it over to Cathy to introduce herself and start the presentation.
Thanks, Mike. Yeah, thanks for the introduction. I'm excited to introduce the newest trail funding program from American Trails, the Legacy Trails program. It's funded by the USDA Forest Service, and it's administered by American Trails in collaboration with the diverse partners that represent the breadth of the motorized and non-motorized community. So we'll get into all this, but before we get going, I'd love to invite you to put your questions in the chat, and we should have plenty of time to answer them at the end, and any that we aren't able to get to or don't know the answer to, we'll follow up, and we can put that on our website at the frequently asked questions section. So without further ado, advance to the next. Okay, so the Legacy Trails program represents huge growth for American Trails in terms of being able to help fund Trails programs. But I want to take a moment to explain our two programs to give you a context. So we launched our first grant program last year with a budget of just over $50,000. We awarded grants to 7 amazing Trails programs and projects on public and private land across the country in 2022. And this program was initially called the Trail Fund. It's now been renamed the Trails Capacity Program because it's focused on building capacity in the trail community through research, education, and stewardship. And we're currently fundraising for it and anticipating opening it to applications again in 2023, so keep your eye out for that. This webinar is focused on introducing and explaining the Legacy Trails program, which has a total yearly budget of $1.5 million. So that's really exciting. And this is to fund projects on Forest Service land. So I'd love to turn it over to Kristen to just give us a little overview of the program.
Sure, thank you. My name is Kristen Thrall. I'm currently the Acting Assistant National Trail Program Lead, and I'm physically located in Michigan. The Legacy Roads and Trail Program is a program within the Forest Service that has traditionally been based on watershed improvement. Very successful aquatic organism passage projects, for example, have been funded. It is focused on existing roads and trails and really how do we improve the trails to make them more sustainable and have a less of an impact on watershed and watershed function. And this specific round of funding is funded by the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, and the Forest Service was able to fund $1.5 million for this program, and we're really excited to have partners be able to directly apply for the grant funding and leverage all the wonderful things that they're doing, and to show that improved value in what our partners do for National Forest System lands. And this is the first round, and we are really hoping that this is carried on into the future. So it's an exciting time, and I'll pass it back to you.
Great, thanks, Kristen. All right, so you might be wondering who can apply. If you are a member of a non-profit organization, a business, or an agency at the non-federal level, you can apply for this funding. Again, American Trails is managing the program and will be awarding the funding. But you do need to have some form of agreement with your local Forest Service office so that we know you're coordinating with them on your project. And we really do encourage volunteer engagement. That's really one of the goals of this program, is to encourage engagement with the community and bringing volunteers and leveraging their labor on this. So you don't have to have a volunteer component. You can simply do your project with paid staff, with consultants, but we encourage volunteer involvement. The program wants to see that. So an overview of the program. The funding available for each project will range between about $5,000 for a smaller project up to $100,000. The application, it's going to be opening in the fall. Look for it around the first week of October. Keep your eye open on the American Trails website for the application portal to open in early October, and then we'll be awarding program. I think that anybody gets awarded, it'll be next spring. There is a match requirement. It's a 50% match that can be cash or in kind. It doesn't have to be cash. And this can be for trails that are motorized or non-motorized. But of course, we're talking about wilderness today, so we're really just talking about non-motorized. I'm going to hand it back over to Randy to talk about the project evaluation team. Again, the management of the project will be American Trails in conjunction with Forest Service. And yeah, I'll let Randy talk a little bit about the way we're going to be doing the project evaluation with the oversight committee.
Thanks, Cathy. Yeah, one of the key components of the NWSA's Trail Partner Fund is that we utilize the skills and expertise, the communities that are involved in the other trail groups. So with that, what I mean is that we engaged and involved both the motorized and non-motorized trails community in reviewing projects, in soliciting projects, and then actual selection of projects. And as you can see the logos here, the partners that have been involved with the Trail Partner Fund that NWSA manages has also come on board to be involved in the review selection process for this Legacy Trails Fund. We're actually going to expand it and include Tread Lightly, and also engage some conservation groups in the pre-review, in some of the pre-screening of projects. Groups like Tread Lightly and Trout Unlimited will be engaged in looking at the biological effects of some of the projects and helping to understand the value and the benefit that they might provide. This is pretty exciting to have this broad spectrum community of the trails groups brought together to work together. It's really, I think, helped us build better relationships at the national level, and certainly has helped us to better understand each other's needs within the community and cut down some of the friction that might have occurred in the past between the motorized and non-motorized communities. At least that's our hope and our goal as we move forward with this. I'm pretty excited and glad to have all the partners involved in both the Trail Partner Fund and now the Legacy Trail Fund. Cathy, right back to you.
Thanks, Randy. Yeah, so you may be aware that there are 9 geographic regions for the Forest Service. These are forests and grasslands. Together, we have more than 160,000 miles of trails, 7,200 trail bridges, and 370,000 miles of roads in a variety of ecological settings and on many soil types and conditions. Now, many of these Forest Service roads are aging and were built to lower design standards, maybe even over 50 years ago. So there are a lot of roads in need of repair that could break apart and dump sediment into the rivers and block stream flow and cause irreparable harm to aquatic species. So that's kind of part of the problem here. We have billions of dollars of backlog on Forest Service land. But this program is intended to help address that problem. It's a little bit of an access problem when you have 7,200 trail bridges to maintain and they don't all get the attention they need. It can be a safety hazard and an access issue. And of course, then deferred maintenance can also cause unauthorized trails to start to proliferate. You have then, they're vulnerable to damage by extreme weather events, and they can be confusing, and of course aquatic habitat may be impacted. There's also the impacts to public drinking water sources. So another issue is fish. The upper reaches of many watersheds are no longer accessible. So if you have a culvert that doesn't let a fish swim upstream to its spawning grounds, then you're looking at the decline of that species. Just for example, the headwaters of many streams and rivers in California aren't connected anymore largely because of culverts that don't allow that connection. So if you have a project in mind that might be able to restore passage for fish, it could be accomplished by improving, repairing, replacing a culvert, or removing a barricade to fish passage. That's one of the things this program is looking to fund. The intent of the program is to carry out projects that are on National Forest System trails that improve resilience in many ways. So that's a good investment for everyone because projects are going to be robust and resist additional, impacts. So I'd love for Randy to go over some of these if he's willing.
Certainly will. This is what I meant by certain types of criteria involved. So the Legacy Roads and Trails program is focused on improving aquatic habitat, fish passage, and generally watershed health. So the types of projects that would be considered are limited, but that within those limits, there's a broad range of projects that can be considered. So these are typically going to be trail improvement projects, not necessarily just annual recurring maintenance, but trail improvement projects that are going to restore fish passage and aquatic habitat. That might be where you've got some puncheons that are blocking off a stream, or maybe you've got some turnpikes in a marshy area that is actually affecting water quality and affecting stream habitat. You might consider making some adjustments there, putting in some small scale bridges, or doing some other work that would restore connectivity between the habitats. It's also about relocating trails to put them in positions where they're not causing erosion, where there be less chance of material being dumped into existing streams, watersheds. There's opportunity to convert roads to trails. So in wilderness, those might be old mining roads. Certainly they're not active roads, but there could be old tracks that still need to be put to bed, so to speak, be narrowed down, put in the proper erosion control features, and be able to be reused as a trail instead of an old road feature on the landscape. There's opportunity to build trail bridges to, again, provide for fish passage, provide for water, for free flow of water without it coming across trails. All those sorts of things can be done in terms of adding trail bridges. Small or large doesn't really matter, just whatever is appropriate in the particular wilderness setting that you're working with. You can use these funds to decommission unauthorized trails. We know that social trail networks around high use areas can often be a source of sediment, of disturbance to watersheds, aquatic habitat. And so a case could be made that you'd be able to decommission those unauthorized trails, use these funds to clean up that disturbance, to rehabilitate it, and get vegetation restored in those places, as long as you can show that watershed benefit. It's a chance to decommission closed trails. And these would be trails that have been authorized in the past, but are no longer needed or necessary for the National Forest Trail system. And the only caveat with these is that they have to have gone through some sort of a travel management or NEPA analysis that included public comment before there can be any decommissioning of a past authorized trail. And I think you got all realize why that is. It's just to make sure that the public's aware of what roads and trails are currently available to them. And then finally, the projects that would just generally protect watershed health and public drinking water where they might be affected by a trail system or parts of the previous road system that could be decommissioned could be considered as well. So they all have a component of watershed health, improvement of aquatic resources, and eliminating old past problems relative to the roads and trails that might have existed on the national forests that are no longer necessary and needed. All of those can be considered as part of this program. Cathy?
Great, thanks, Randy. So we can get into a little bit of examples to help you imagine what your project could look like when you apply. When you talk about building trail bridges, it doesn't have to be something really expensive and fancy. It can be pretty simple. It doesn't have to be way off the ground. You can think about just where your trail is crossing a stream and thinking about how that can be constructed in a way which is really robust, so that if there's an extreme weather event, you don't get a lot of erosion and washouts and that kind of thing. So it doesn't have to be super fancy, it can be simple. Thinking about converting a road to a trail, you could still keep using that for recreational use as you're doing the work, potentially even. This can mean you're just got teams of volunteers out there doing work like clearing or repairing structures. You can install signage as part of your project. Sometimes a lot of trails can be improved greatly by some informational signage that helps people know, oh wait, all right, where does that go? So all that is the goal of it, is to say that the deferred maintenance can be reduced. So we're not talking about maintenance that wasn't done last year, but maintenance that's been deferred for more than a year or so. It's just been beyond the reach to be able to do until you get the funding that can help really address it. And as you're talking to your Forest Service office, they'll help you know, okay, does this work meet the national quality standards, the Forest Service trail management objectives? So they'll be familiar with what those objectives are that can be helpful to you. Another example of decommissioning an unauthorized trail, maybe there's a trail that we talk about desire lines, trails that are social trails that just, you can see the destination, so people end up cutting over there, but sometimes those trails aren't very well thought out and they end up being really fragile. They wash out every time there's a rain. So if you can decommission and restore those areas and maybe even move that trail, it might be kind of hard and takes a lot of time. That's why we have the funding to do this. So that's ultimately the goal, to increase resilience. Sometimes just needing to relocate a trail without decommissioning anything, just trails that have just been in a tough spot, well, we can fund that. All right, so the application packet, it's kind of a lot. We're trying to break it down for you. Maybe it looks worse than it is once you start thinking about it. I've kind of got this in order. So if you're going to be thinking about your project narrative, what's your project, first of all? What do you think it might be? What could it accomplish? What might be the benefits? Who will it serve? Then you go to talk to your district ranger, district supervisor, the line officer at your Forest Service office. Get them on board, say, hey, we're thinking of this project. We haven't completely got it put together. Get them to help you figure out, is it on a priority trail? How does it fit with what they're doing? They can help identify where that location is, what the scope of your project is. Of course, once you've got a scope, then you can put a budget to it. Sometimes you have to circle around a little bit. Of course, we want to see that you're documenting that if you have an IRS letter to show us your tax exempt status or your business license. If you're a local agency, we don't need you to document your legitimacy. Maybe a letter of support from your team is fine. We'll need to see a timeline. It doesn't have to be very extensive, just a little bit of a narrative. And then any other documentation. Think about, as you begin planning your project, think about how your community might support it. What other letters can you add that will help kind of bolster your application to show that there's a lot of support? And do you want to put a map? I don't think that's required in the application, but it's nice to know for us, as we're going to be evaluating projects, to know where is it located. So think about that. This is just an overview, but it's intended to give you, as a potential applicant, an idea of the whole scope of everything. It's not just the application process itself, but think about, okay, you're going to be doing some scoping, thinking about what your project is, thinking about your budget, your timeline. Then you'll be applying. You'll have a chance ahead of time to see what all the pieces that we'll be asking for, putting that into the digital portal. I think that's probably going to close in sometime in December or mid-December. So budget your time too, so that you're not trying to apply at the very last minute. And then let's assume you are awarded. You've got to be thinking about, great, I'm so happy that we were able to award your project. There'll be some publicity opportunities for you, your organization, your project, even American Trails, so that we can help spread the word about this program year after year. And then think about what the project reporting might be, even as you start doing your scoping. How much capacity have you built into that to manage the project, to do the reporting, to write the summary? Invoicing won't be a big problem. It's fairly straightforward, but we'll get into a little bit more detail about this. So thinking about how feasible your project is. Does it have the approval? Have you engaged the Forest Service? You, of course, need to do that. What's your match look like? How much of it is in kind? How much is cash? What are you accomplishing? How many miles of trail are you improving? How many bridges? What are the kind of metrics of it? Are you looking at maintenance needs in priority areas that your district ranger has identified? Is there a benefit to the National Forest System trails? These are kind of like things that you might want to just put in your narrative as you describe your project that will help the evaluators go, yes, that's something we're looking for. Then this is pretty important, how is your project protecting or restoring water quality, habitats? How are you restoring watershed with an action plan? And of course, who does it engage? How have you engaged volunteer participation? Are you working with the Youth Corps? If you've got community support, we're going to really want to see that. Okay, you've got your scope. Now you're assembling all that into your project budgeting timeline. Again, your match needs to be half of your total requested funding. So again, looking for a 50% match. It's acceptable to do in kind. You don't have to do cash. Now, we're most likely going to divide the projects we receive into small or large categories. So small might be between about 5 to 20K total project budget. Larger projects up to 100,000. So think about how your project feels like a smaller one or a larger one. And you have 2 field seasons to spend the money. So keep that in mind too as you're thinking of your scope, how you're going to be managing the project. So you'll upload everything into the portal. Then let's say you do get awarded, great. Put out a press release, take the opportunity to do some social media posts, plan that into your project even. It can only help you in future years. You might get funded again, and that way you've continued to build that engagement with your people. And then this invoicing and reporting, it's not too daunting, but do keep in mind that you'll need to complete the work first for reimbursement. You'll be able to invoice every month, I believe that should be possible. So if you're a really small organization, we can work with you on that. Make sure you don't have to wait a long time for the invoice to be paid. But we'll help you on that if you are awarded. And then keep in mind, we'll want to do a final report, which will be after your funding is spent. So January of 2025. Randy, I don't know if you want to talk about this, the way that the Forest Service works, or Kristen even, that this kind of the fine print over here.
Okay, I'm sorry, I was responding to a chat.
Oh, that's all right. I kind of brought you
so
last second.
So say the question again.
Oh, just if this is a little bit something just for applicants to know. We can't absolutely guarantee the funding every year because it depends on it being part of the final budget and allocation. So
yeah, these are challenged cost share funds, so that they are dependent upon federal funding. But once this project money is authorized, it will be available through the life of the project. So once these projects are approved, the funding for them will be available through the life of the project on a reimbursable basis, where the program applicant, selected applicant, will do the work and then will submit invoices for reimbursement for the work based on the approved work plan and budget and the approved activities associated with the project. That reimbursement usually takes anywhere from 45 to 60 days to happen. So once a project work is done and an invoice is sent to American Trails will roll those up on a regular basis, send the request to the Forest Service. The Forest Service will review it and turn around and pay American Trails, and then American Trails will turn around and provide the reimbursement out to each of the program awardees. And so that, again, hopefully in the best of times, with our challenge cost share program, it's gotten where we could do that turnaround in about 30 days. The budget and finance folks have taken a little longer here the last year and a half with some of the COVID issues and some of the big fire issues that they had last fall. It's now taking more like 45 to 60 days to have that cycle turn around. Still reasonable, and I think still doable. It depends on the individual organization's cash flow too, whether you want to invoice on a monthly basis or at the end of the project. I think that really is up to each individual organization and how frequently they submit invoicing for project work that's being done.
Yeah. Kristen, if you have anything to add, please jump in.
Sure. All I'd add is the 1.5 million is already obligated, so future years would be dependent on budgets.
Yeah, right. So we are secure in offering the program, awarding it in the spring of 2023. There's no question about that, and you'll be able to fund a 2-year project from there. But future years, we have to make sure it's funded. Great, thanks. So you may be curious about how this is going to be evaluated. We can tell you that we're going to be looking for we're going to be doing a little bit of a basic pre-screen to make sure, and you should, as you're applying, think about, does your project have eligible activities as Randy described them? Are you at least doing one of the eligible activities of protecting watershed health in a certain way? You can do more than one, of course. Do you have the support of the Forest Service? Is it feasible? And when we say feasible, we're talking about, is your scope and budget doable? Is the project team sufficient to complete the project successfully? Are you an eligible organization? Are you a nonprofit or a non-federal public entity? So we're going to be looking for that part first. Now, next, we go into a little bit more of this. When we evaluate projects, we'll be looking to see 4 different factors and bringing that all together, trying to find the projects that really score highest in terms of maximizing resiliency and sustainability. So we'll integrate the evaluation from social projects that have a strong social aspect to them will be really, really important to have. Do you have sustained engagement over time? Do you have responsible trail behavior that you are anticipating your project can encourage? That's a nice long-lasting social benefit that you can highlight if that's potentially part of your project. Your project going to be, how will you protect the environment, the watershed function and the habitat quality? Will the impact of your project economically be a long-lasting, durable, and resistant to future failure? And will you address critical issues like habitat degradation and trail user safety? So to give you a little bit more of a feel of this, when you're thinking about your social engagement, think about the number of volunteers relative to the size of your project and how the connectivity and the social harmony, the access, the way it can build community. Also, of course, think about culturally diverse communities, populations, underserved, underrepresented people, tribes, what is your local situation and who can you engage that maybe hasn't been engaged in the past, that this project can be sort of can bring you toward them. The word is catalyst. So environmental protection, of course, the most successful project is going to increase the health of aquatic habitat, reduce erosion, improve viability. And we have metrics for that. We're going to be looking for priority goals of improving a watershed that supplies a public drinking water source, protecting or improving habitats for listed species, so whether they're endangered, threatened, or otherwise listed, cultural impacts that are mitigated, helping people to behave better vis-a-vis the stream trail crossing. And then we'll be looking to measure the improvements your project represents by the mile. So deferred maintenance by the mile, how much are you addressing with that? How much are you improving? How much upstream habitat are you reconnecting? We want to know that by the linear mile up to the upper edges of the watershed. And then other improvements like bridges and culverts. So be thinking about the numbers there as you put your project together. Of course, with the economic impact of your project, you need to show that it's got significant local investment. That's where your match might come in. Does it improve resilience? And does it economically benefit the community that's adjacent? Not only just, well, there's lots of ways to illustrate that. We've talked about this already a little bit, but think about the way that you've got some critical issues. And is your project, does it represent the fair funding distribution? We'll be thinking about that as we evaluate projects. So we're looking to try to fund projects in all 9 regions. So as an example, here's potentially what a project could look like as it's being scored. There might be this project, the team has evaluated it and found that the justice, equity, and inclusion score and the social value of the project ranked a 2 out of 5. So it's strong, but it's not fantastic. Okay, economically, there was a 4 out of 5. Maybe it had a really strong match. In terms of the environmental aspects, it addressed some priority program goals, got 2 there, and it had some important improvements. And maybe it had a culvert that got replaced or something. It got 1 culvert, so it got 1 point. But then this project, this is just an example, had really addressed some critical issues really well, so it got 5 there. So with the total score, 14 out of 20, that's a pretty good score. So you can think about how you're going to be hitting all these different categories. So you can't have a really high scoring project without having addressed every issue in some way. Now, that's about the end of what I've got prepared, but you can go to our website and find links to a lot more information. And these are all linked on our website, and they're on the Forest Service website. Thinking more about, if you want more background on the Legacy Roads and Trails program, more about how you can help learn about what aquatic organism passage improvements look like. There's a lot more there. Randy, did you want to chime in?
No, I was just getting ready for questions and answers.
Yeah, okay.
I think you've covered it really well.
Okay, great. Well, we'll go to the last slide and we can move into the Q&A.
All right. I think, thank you so much, Cathy, I think, for sharing how American Trails is going to provide this Legacy Trails program for partner groups and the types of projects that can be accomplished with it. So pretty exciting, lots of potential projects in wilderness. So let's open it up for questions and talk about some of those particulars and see what people are thinking. I think given the number of people on the webinar, we can just go ahead and allow people to raise their hand and be recognized and speak their question rather than type it into the chat. So let's go ahead and just have a conversation. Go ahead and we'll stop the screen sharing so we can see everybody. If you have a question, raise your hand. Come join us on the video and well, let's talk. I'd like to hear what you have to say. So Dan Carter, you're the first one up.
Thanks. Thanks for the presentation. And I was just curious, can these funds be used for like organizational, operational expenses such as like staff time, things like that? Or is it only for like contracting or materials, deliverables, stuff like that?
Well, I think as part of the implementation of the project, if you've got staff that are involved and engaged in the direct project impacts, that they're intended to be direct project funding. So if your staff is involved in the project planning and the implementation of it, then it's appropriate for it to be charged that way. I would note that there is going to be an allowance for 10% of indirect costs to be added to the total project cost. So that, of course, can cover a variety of those administrative costs that every organization faces and is important to be able to cover.
Thank you.
All right. So any other questions out there?
I'll give it a try. This is Dave Johnston. Since we're specifically talking about projects in the context of wilderness in this webinar, and since the projects will be in wilderness, they'll have additional considerations that would not apply to non-wilderness areas. And the Forest Service would need to both do a minimum requirements analysis, perhaps NEPA, and then develop a prescription, a plan for what the project would need to be and how it exactly would be implemented in a way that's consistent with the wilderness values and the standards for the particular unit. To what extent, and that plan may or may not already exist. At this point, we've made an inquiry to our unit, but at this point, we don't know what plans they may already have. If they're not very far along on that, to what extent can this project, I'm going to use the word help with that. Can any resources from the grant be applied to work that the Forest Service needs to do in order to plan the project and determine what needs to be done? So I'll leave the first question at that.
Yeah, I'm going to go ahead and answer that, Cathy. I think so. For the most part, these funds can be used for complete project implementation. So they can be used for the planning of the project. They can be used for doing any required analyses or assessments, the minimum requirements decision process, the NEPA, and then the actual on-the-ground implementation. I'm going to further caveat, though, that by saying that these funds cannot be used to pay the Forest Service back for doing any of that work. It would need to be accomplished, though that planning assessment work would need to be accomplished by outside contractor or by staff on the organization, and then be given to the Forest Service for them to approve. But it wouldn't necessarily be money that we could give to the Forest Service in order to accomplish that work. Okay, that's
the Forest Service would in effect have to relinquish that control.
No, they would still have the ultimate authority and decision-making authority on it, but they wouldn't have to do the work of the analysis that can be provided to them by the organization. Now, I would also say that I think the expectation would be that most of these projects are not going to be the kind that would trigger extensive or deliberations on the minimum requirements decision process. I would anticipate that most of these projects would be done using traditional tools, non-motorized equipment, wouldn't trigger any of the prohibited activities or prohibitions that would trigger the minimum requirements decision process. And that the NEPA for most of these projects would be pretty small scale or limited to already existing classifications of categorical exclusions or decision memos that don't need any documentation. So, there are going to be exceptions. So I'm sure there's some larger scale projects out there that might trigger the need for a minimum decisions process for motorized equipment. But for the most part, we're talking about things that you would typically do already in the context of your annual maintenance, but now might move into an improvement project, both at a larger scale or a small scale. Does that
Thank you.
help, David?
Yeah, I'll probably follow up with you on some specifics for our case, as
Okay.
you were helpful last week. And
All
that
right.
answers the general question. Thanks.
Sure. Other questions? Donna?
Yes, thank you. I have a question. I couldn't see where the raise my hand feature was. So I have a question. I understand that these projects that this funding is not for routine trail maintenance, but in the presentation you mentioned, or Cathy mentioned, that this funding could be used to reduce existing deferred maintenance of trails. And I wonder if you could clarify what that difference is.
Well, usually if you're going to eliminate deferred maintenance, you're fixing problems that exist on a trail that have been accumulating over a period of time. And that typically is something more than just routine maintenance. Now, it's going to, you could call it just a heavy duty maintenance of some sort, but usually it's restoring tread, it's cutting the vegetation back to the original setbacks. It might be replacing or improving water bars or other structures on the trail for erosion. It's usually much more extensive than just routine annual maintenance. So I think the main thing is, we're not saying that you can't do routine maintenance with these projects funds or as a result of the project. That just can't be its purpose and goal. The purpose and goal needs to be the improvement of the watershed resources and aquatic habitat as part of the completion of the project. We get a lot of good trail work done as a result of doing that improvement work. But it's beyond and above just routine maintenance.
Okay, thank
Okay.
you.
All right. Caitlin, you've got your hand up.
Hi, thank you for the presentation today. You might have gone over this, but I'm curious on the 50% match. Is that going to be all non-federal, or can we use other existing federal funding to match?
Can't use federal funding for the match. Sorry.
No,
Yeah,
no.
the goal of the program is to leverage the federal funding by using other sources of the match.
There is
Great.
a caveat to that, in that there's some type, it might be more appropriate to say we're not allowing any Forest Service federal funding to be used for the match. There are some types of federal funding from other agencies that could possibly be involved, like the gas tax money that gets put to the states through the RST programs. That kind of match money can be considered, but truthfully, we're going to be looking at trying to leverage outside resources to the greatest extent possible. So we'll be looking at the non-federal sources as having a higher value than other federal sources. But the killer would be no Forest Service funding can be used to qualify as a match, whether that comes from the resource, the RACs, and the money that they get through the Forest Service for payment in lieu of taxes, money that gets funneled back to the agency and partners for doing work on the national forest. Anything that had its genesis from the Forest Service is going to be looked at with a fine-tooth comb, just because we're trying to leverage beyond those funds and try to bring outside private money as much as we can.
Great, thank you so much.
You bet. Thank you for the question. Do we have any other questions or thoughts about the program that you'd like to share? Mike, Caitlin, do you guys want to, and Kristen, do you want to say anything more just from what you've heard so far? Any clarifications that you'd like to provide? about the program and kind of the next steps as we continue this part of our process of letting people know about the program so that they can consider it and are willing to apply.
I think everybody did a great job. Those are the questions that were asked today are the ones that we're getting a lot internally within the Forest Service. So great job, everybody.
I just wanted to pitch in something that I've noticed in other conversations. A lot of our partners can get frustrated in the NEPA process because it's a backlog. It's the Forest Service staff that are able to do NEPA analysis. They've got sometimes get a long running list, and it just takes a while to work through that process. And this might be a great opportunity for a partner to play a role in kind of helping move that or get beyond those backlogs by bringing in a contractor that's trusted by the Forest Service. So that communication between the Forest Service and the contractor, they still need to know who that contractor is and trust their results. But if that's the case, then you can use these funds to contract that service and get past that hurdle, that NEPA hurdle that people mention a lot. So I just wanted to mention that, as I imagine that might resonate with a lot of the folks on this call.
Yeah, I think it's going to be the scale and scope of the improvement work that you're looking at is what's going to trigger the need for documentation in a NEPA document. So there's ways to manage that by looking at that size and scale and looking and using your categorical exclusions to the extent that you can. And for most projects in wilderness, I would suspect there's going to be a CE category that would qualify, that may not require a decision memo, may just be authorization by the agency to move forward. And on that authorization, what we're mainly talking about is that we expect these groups that are having these projects would already have a volunteer agreement in place with the agency, either a sponsored agreement or some sort of a group agreement that just recognizes their ability to go do work on the national forest. That's the extent of it. No other challenge cost share agreement is necessary. No other type of partnership agreement is necessary. It's really pretty straightforward. Mike, you've got your hand up. Also muted, Mike.
There we go. Now I finally got myself unmuted.
There you go.
Would you accept something other than a volunteer agreement if a mutual benefit agreement like a cost share or a PA was in place already?
Oh, for sure. That's definitely acceptable. Yeah, because some units already have those participating agreements, and that's definitely an allowable form.
Okay, thanks.
I have a question. At the webinar a couple weeks ago, it was indicated that the application materials and further a website for this program would be up in early October. Has there been any update on that, on the scheduling for that?
Cathy, you want to describe the process and when people can expect to see those materials?
Yeah, we're working on that. We're engaging the oversight committee and looking at some of our materials ahead of opening the portal. So we're hoping that by the end of the first week of October, 5th to the 7th, somewhere in there. So keep your eye open, and we'll hopefully give an announcement too when we get the portal ready. We want to make sure everything's completely ready.
And I believe that the deadline for applications would not be until the end of the year. So there'll be several months where people will have access to that information before an application is due. Is that not right, Cathy?
Yeah, I think, Mike, you can pitch in if you're still here. It looks like he might have gone off the call. I think we were looking at early to mid-December to try to close the window, not to try to rush things, but just because then we need to start evaluating things with the team so that we can have time to do that process and then award things by February, ideally.
Yeah,
But,
I think there'll be at least 60 days where people have the opportunity to make
yeah,
make
and of course,
application.
you can start putting your project together right now.
Mhm.
Um,
Yep.
Don't wait till the last minute to apply.
All right. Well, we're getting close to the top of the hour. We may have time for one more question. Anybody like to raise their hand or just speak up? Well, seeing none, I'm going to go ahead and just say my thanks to Cathy and Kristen and Dave for being here, and Mike for being here. Thank all of you for participating in this webinar from the National Wilderness Stewardship Alliance. This webinar has been recorded and will be posted on our website within a matter of a couple of days. So it'll be available for future reference and review. And as Cathy's mentioned, further information about the Legacy Trail Fund will be available on the American Trails website within a couple of weeks. So we're looking forward to having everybody apply. There'll be more information and updates and reminders coming out through NWSA's Friday newsletter, as well as on the American Trails website. So thanks, everybody. We'll go ahead and close out this webinar, and we will hopefully see everybody soon. Next month, let me just put a reminder in that our next month's webinar is going to look at volunteer programs and what kind of the requirements and obligations are involved. Oh, actually, no, October, that's November, as we're going to talk about the volunteer program. In October, we're going to talk about one of our partner organizations, the Poudre Wilderness Volunteers, recently was involved in some communications work that received an Emmy. And so we're going to talk about communications from your organizations, working with local news media, and how that work with local news media might even end up with an Emmy award. So look forward to seeing you there. More information will be coming out shortly in our website and in our newsletter. So thanks, everybody. Have a great day.
Randy,
Yeah.
before you close, I saw there was one more question in the chat. Are the slides themselves available? It's
Yes.
cool to be able to watch the webinar, but it would be great if we could refer other people to the slides themselves, because they're very explanatory.
You
Yeah,
bet. Yeah, we will
American
make.
Trails website, you can download the PDF of the full presentation.
We
So-
will
is
make
that
them available. It's on the American Trails website now. We'll also make
great.
them available on our website with the webinar recording.
Great, thank you.
Okay. Well, thanks, everybody. Have a great day. We'll talk to you all soon.
Thank you, everybody.